Chapter 42. The Rescue at Cape Canaveral. December 25th, 2086. Merritt Island, Florida. The starship Kakama thundered across the Florida landscape. It would be a short journey from the ruins of Orlando to the UN base. Aboard the aging vessel, the occupants had only minutes to prepare. Starting with Inez, Sarah, Corder, and Victoria, everyone visited the Gray Phoenix Armory 2 decks below. They discarded their formal outfits and donned whatever armor was available. Unfortunately, because Gray Phoenix was acting, until recently, outside of the law, the armory only contained the sort of gear one would expect guerrilla fighters to use. Lightweight plate armor was the only protection available to the would-be rescuers. Inez and Victoria each took a spider suit, an XCOM combat suit that was very badly outdated. Judging from the ways hers looked and smelled, Inez would not have been surprised to learn that it was manufactured in 2015. "Without power armor, we'll be vulnerable to poison gas and incendiary weapons," Victoria commented. "Then pray our enemy has neither," Corder suggested. Inez tied a holster to her leg and placed the Shadowkeeper in it. Victoria peered down at the weapon before looking back up at Inez. "That's my grandmother's gun," Victoria said. "Yeah, your granddad gave it to me," Inez replied. Victoria paused. She looked as though she was trying to make sense of something. Then her eyes widened. "Holy shit, I never thought of that. You and I are family. If you ignore Akira being from some other timeline, I guess," Victoria said. "Huh, try not to get killed, cousin." Lawrence, Jay, and Sarah exchanged their gorilla fatigues for slightly more modern plated armor. Maui scanned the old equipment with his smart glasses and reported that protection would be minimal. "Each of us can only withstand 1 or 2 direct hits from a plasma weapon with this armor," he said. "We must try to avoid a direct confrontation if we can." "And how will we do that?" asked Irabik. The avian senator was riding atop of her Batera escort. The giant robot stomped around the armory, too big to fit comfortably inside. "We'll use this," Lawrence replied. He moved swiftly to one of the equipment lockers and opened the door. He withdrew the strange contraption Piper brought from Canaveral. "That's the portable hologram device," Inez said. "The one my mom was using to create the false Jericho." Lawrence nodded. "There's a good chance Akira did not know Jericho was in Orlando," Lawrence replied. "If we show this thing off, we might get a few of the base staff to realize just what kind of monster they're working for and come over to our side. It's worth a shot." Everyone murmured and nodded in agreement. 2 minutes to Canaveral!" Shipbreaker Carfu called from the bridge. "We're going to come in low and fast so the anti-air guns don't get us." As the Kakama sailed over the ruins of Titusville, everyone got a glimpse of the wreckage below. Whatever force destroyed the Mahuika and Orlando had struck here as well. A trench was gouged into the town, so deep that it was starting to fill with water from the Indian River. Cape Canaveral lay ahead. On the bridge, Inez could look through the front window and see the lights of the Apollo Center. An alarm sounded from the helm. "We're coming in too fast!" Carfu shouted. At the helm, Runhan Somtaw gripped the controls tightly. "Nothing we can do about that," she said. "It's either this or get shot down. Everyone brace for a hard landing." Kakama put her nose down and dove. Inez looked around the bridge and grabbed Cassandra, holding her tight. The Batera warform braced itself in a far corner while the Emerald Institute team held onto its limbs. All 3 Cybon fighters flapped their wings and took flight, grabbing onto the backs of chairs with their talons to hold steady. Runhan leveled out the descent just a few feet from the ground, and then gently lowered the Kakama onto the surface. With a great roar, the muddy swamp water splashed up and away from the starship before coming back down with a loud crash. Kakama lurched forward and then came to rest in the swamp. The aged vessel made a series of deep groans, and then several pieces of armor fell off. "The ship's coming apart!" Setla yelled. "Everyone out!" The 24 rescuers quickly moved to evacuate the ship. Ted Navarro, one of Colonel Sharp's Native American allies, kicked open a boarding hatch and led the escape. 2 at a time, everyone splashed down into the ankle-deep mud. Behind them, the starship groaned and creaked again. The engine bell detached from the old frigate and fell into the swamp, splashing everyone nearby. Cassandra screamed as slabs of armor plating broke free, sliding down the hull and into the mud. Just as Irabik, Setla, and the Batera got free of the shipwreck, the Kakama's lights finally went out, and the 2-century-old frigate was still. "Is everyone here?" Inez called out. She quickly took a head count and verified that all 24 rescuers, plus 1 Batera, were present. "Not gonna lie, I really thought that ship was our ticket out of here," Bradley Mara said. The Michiganian resistance fighter looked around. "How are we gonna get 200 some odd kids out of here without it?" "We can't," Inez said. "That's why we left McCavity behind with the Levakians and Mutons. He's going to put together a proper rescue party and then come get us." "So he's going to rescue the rescuers," said Naveen Soban. "Some plan." Runhan gave her compatriot a harsh look. The Higaran pirate quickly changed his tune. "But it's the best plan we've got, so, engines ahead full, I say." Inez tapped her leg to make sure the Shadowkeeper was still in its holster. Then she turned around and started walking toward the distant lights of the Apollo Center. "I know Rafi Bakir pretty well," she said. "He'll assume we'll try to fix the starship before kicking off a rescue attempt. If we leave now, we can get to the kids before base security arrives." To her surprise, no one argued with Inez. The team moved out at once. Cassandra rode on Setla's shoulders, while Nainu rode on hers. Everyone else started squelching through the marshy ground, putting distance between themselves and the shipwreck. The walk from Kakama to the Apollo Center was less eventful than Inez was expecting. She, and several other members of the party, were expecting to be ambushed or engaged by base security at any moment, to say nothing of the 500 space rangers stationed here. In a nightmare scenario, Inez knew that Rafi Bakir would be on the base, personally leading those elite troops. Yet the minutes ticked by, and the group moved deeper into swampland surrounding Cape Canaveral. Whenever someone's feet sloshed loudly in the muddy water, Inez was terrified that they would be found out, but no enemies came. There were no searchlights, shouting, or gunfire. This only made her feel more apprehensive. Inez looked around, checking in on her fellow rescuers. Peering up, Inez saw Cassandra. Her younger sister was riding on Setla's shoulders, turning her head from side to side as though she was scanning the horizon. Cassandra held onto Setla's head and muttered to herself, "We're invisible. We're like totally invisible. The bad guys can't see us right now." 6 months ago, Inez would have witnessed this and failed to understand any of it. But things were different now. Inez knew about psionic sensitivity, as well as the link between herself and Cassandra. Inez had to open her mind for just a moment before she perceived something. A kind of warm energy was radiating out of Cassandra's body. It was not the same painful heat she gave off just before a transformation, but something else. Cassandra's body was emitting psionic energy, and she was making a conscious effort to control it. For just a fleeting moment, Inez hoped that Cassandra's power would tip the scales. Then she pushed the thought out of her mind. Asking Cassandra to use her power would be the same thing as asking the young girl to stand in the front line. Up ahead, there were signs of activity. All 3 dry docks at the Apollo Center were illuminated, and the Prophet-class cruisers were being readied for launch. The Apollo building itself was abuzz. Even from 300 yards away, it was possible to hear the noise and chatter of 200 alien children talking to one another. "We aren't normally awake this late at night," Cassandra commented. "They must be getting ready to move everyone." "Onto the ships, probably," Inez said. Then she turned to the rescuers. "Stealth," she hissed. "Everyone keep low and quiet. We need to hold the element of surprise for as long as we can. Erabik, tell the big guy to hang back until we're ready for him. Cassandra, when we get started, I want you to find the biggest, thickest tree and hide behind it. You stay there until I come back for you, understand?" "But Cassandra started to say. "Stay behind the tree," Inez insisted. "And if any bad guys come for you, use your gift." Up above, there was a brilliant half moon. There would not be enough light to reveal the rescuers until they came closer. Tall grass and cattails grew wild in the swamp, allowing Inez and her team to draw near without being spotted. Setla held back. The sheer size of his body caused him to make sloshing noises in the water, but if a fight broke out, he could catch up and become a giant, lumbering terror in the night. Corder and her Levakian comrade were right at home in these conditions. They slunk through the tall grass as though hunting, weapons at the ready. Behind them, a UN Sky Ranger flew in circles above the Kakama crash site, trying to figure out where everyone had gone. But after just half an hour, the rescue team had reached the edge of the Apollo Center's perimeter and were hiding in a dense grove of shrubbery and tall grass, just outside of the carefully manicured lawn. As quietly as she could, Inez signaled a halt. Victoria and Lawrence carried the message to everyone else, and before long, the whole team stopped and was holding position in their hiding spaces. The trio of Cybon fluttered up and into a nearby tree, watching the scene from high up. Inez picked out a large tree in the northwest corner of the complex, not too far from the backside of the Apollo complex's main building. In between the complex and the dry docks, there was an open grass field, and just over 200 alien children were gathered together, dressed in winter clothing. The kids were huddled in a massive group, standing together, while several men and women wearing base security uniforms patrolled the perimeter. "Not much longer now," said a familiar voice. "We just need to get a few things straightened away, and we'll start loading the ships." Dr. Polly Spark was addressing the children, standing on top of a milk crate. While she spoke, UN operative Yasin Ackerman was holding a tablet computer up to her face. Polly adjusted her oversized glasses while she read whatever was on the screen. Inez counted the armed guards and realized her team of rescuers actually outnumbered them. She turned to Lawrence and Victoria. "Okay, here's the plan," Inez whispered. "Mom needs those kids for Project Prometheus. Without them, she doesn't have her first generation of psionic soldiers. There's 23 of us and about 10 guards out there. I need you to quietly tell everyone to get in position to spring an ambush. We'll take them by surprise and get the kids." "Then we hole up inside that building?" Victoria asked, pointing at the Apollo complex. "I don't like it," Lawrence said. "That building is too close to the starships Akira wants to escape on. Plus, we need a place McCavity and his forces can reach more easily, like a building on the main road." "The VAB is your best bet," Inez replied. "You can get there on major roads from the north and south, and you can see it from far away. Oh, and it's huge." "How do they move 200 kids around?" Lawrence asked. "There's got to be a bus nearby." "2 buses," Inez replied. "They're parked just over there, around the far corner of the building." She pointed to the east side of the Apollo Center. "If we need to move the kids, the buses are easy to use. Just hit a button on the console and the engines will start up," she said. "So that's the plan," Lawrence repeated. "Ambush, get the kids, move the kids to the VAB, hole up, and wait for rescue." "Yeah, I can do that." The group started to fan out, keeping to the darkness. Meanwhile, Polly Spark was talking into a two-way radio. "Get the director over here," she was saying. "Tell her Ackerman found something she'll want to see." A UN Army vehicle started driving across the field. Inez could see it was some kind of armored personnel carrier, armed with a rotary laser cannon attached to its top side. The rescue party stopped moving and hunkered down, watching the vehicle warily. To her left, Inez heard the telltale slam of a car door. Then, a group of figures came around the side of the Apollo Center, walking into the field. Inez gasped, remembering at the last second to cover her mouth. The false Jericho was approaching. Now that she had seen the real Jericho, spotting the fake one was easy. Her snow-white hair and cape billowed behind her, yet there was no wind. "That's the paradox," Sarah breathed. "She's using that disguise again." "The paradox is impersonating Jericho?" Nainu said. "No wonder my blood boiled." "Holograms?" Eribik hissed. "Yeah, holograms and maybe some other energy fields," Professor Espinosa replied. "She can fake psionic powers with that thing too." "Don't rule out real psionics," Carfu warned. "That thing works as an amplifier too." "Shh," Inez hissed. "Look over there." Two of the guards approached the armored personnel carrier and pulled its back door open. 6 men and women were dragged out of the vehicle. They were all handcuffed and looked as though they were recently beaten. All 6 of them wore the uniform of the United Nations military. Inez saw 2 American men, a South Sudanese woman, a Chinese man, an Arabic woman, and a Ukrainian man all being marched out of the vehicle. With a jolt of the stomach, she recognized 2 of them. Central Officer David Sepulveda had a split lip, but looked otherwise unhurt. Next to him was Adam Barter, a UN soldier Inez hooked up with several months ago. The false Jericho sneered at the group of prisoners, and David gave her an equally disdainful look. "I do not need to guess," the false Jericho said, speaking in a voice that just barely resembled Akira's. "There is only one reason the 6 of you would be hiding in a refuse bin for days rather than face me. Out with it." "We know who you are," Adam yelled. "You're not Jericho, and you're not Scarlett Freeman either. You're the Paradox. You blew up Asalele, you killed Makara Ranjanui, Ignatius Petoskey, and so many other people." The false Jericho did not flinch. "The Paradox is dead," she said. "She's been dead for 50 years. How dare you show such disrespect to me, the one who fought and sacrificed to give you this world?" "You're not Jericho!" Adam yelled. "You're a charlatan, a phony, a trickster and a hologram." Polly Spark and Yasin Ackerman closed ranks around the false Jericho, as did several of the security guards. They leered at Adam, many of them with homicidal expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, the crowd of children drew closer to one another, seeming to pick up on what was about to happen. Lavakian cubs mewed and curled their tails between their legs. Vanians hid behind Mutons and Tidani, while a Higaran preteen put his hands over the eyes of an Ashurian girl. The false Jericho looked around at the kids and her supporters. "For you, this will be a lesson in obedience and respect," she told the watching crowd. Then she addressed Adam. "For you, it will be your just punishment." Hidden in the bushes, Nainu grabbed his laser pistol and started to lunge forward, but Corder grabbed him. "Are you nuts?" she hissed. "We're here for the kids. Don't throw your life away." In any other circumstance, Inez would have agreed with Corder instantly. But this was different. She cared about Adam, and fear was making her muscles tense. She, too, was about to lunge. The false Jericho stared into Adam's eyes. His defiant glare met hers, and then the imposter spoke. "On your knees." Adam did not move. "I do not take orders from a monster like you," he said. When she spoke, the false Jericho's voice sounded almost demonic. "I said, kneel." Adam's eyes went wide, and he clasped both hands to the side of his head. He fell to his knees, still holding onto his head, and cried out in pain. It was a strained wail that cracked his voice. Adam pressed both of his hands to his temples and screamed even louder. The other 5 prisoners took a step back, wincing at the miserable noises coming from their comrade. Watching this scene from the safety of her concealment, Inez felt something deep inside of her suddenly snap. She realized that no one was going to save Adam or David or anyone else. She no longer cared if this was the best moment to interfere. Waiting would do no good anymore. "Weapons!" Inez screamed at the top of her voice. "Hold your fire until I give the word! Follow me!" The next moment, 23 fighters emerged from the darkness and stepped onto the open field. Red and green lights from laser and plasma weapons illuminated the rescuers until they stepped into the floodlights with weapons raised. The mass of children saw the newcomers and panicked, screaming and shrieking to the heavens above. The base security guards started to raise their weapons only to hesitate when they realized they were outnumbered. The false Jericho broke her gaze and Adam was released from whatever psionic torture he was going through. Panting, he slumped to the ground. In that single moment of surprise, Inez raised the Shadowkeeper, aiming with both hands on the weapon. Inez put the front sight directly over her mother's chest, but she did not fire. Saving Adam was one thing, but the intervention came so early that Inez had still not built up the mental willpower to kill her own mother. Instead, Inez raised her voice and screamed, "This madness ends right now! Mom, you are a liar and a murderer! You're not Jericho, you're not even close to being the kind of savior she is! You're a monster! You're lower than the beast! You are Akira Robinson! Everyone who knows the truth, over here!" David Sepulveda, Adam Barter, and the other 4 prisoners quickly scrambled across the grass toward the rescue party. But they had only gone a few paces when, over their shoulders, Inez saw one member of the base security recover from their shock and start running to join Inez and the rescuers. "Cowards!" the false Jericho yelled. "Everyone who yearns for a free Earth and a strong humanity to my side!" There was an ear-splitting bang! A column of white light shot into the night sky before exploding into a ball of red fire that sank slowly back to the ground. "Flares!" Bradley said. "They're calling for reinforcements!" "It's now or never," Maui added. "Light 'em up!" Inez shouted. Gunfire erupted on both sides of the battle line. Combatants dropped to the ground, crawling for any cover or concealment they could find. The huddled mass of children screamed and shrieked before turning and starting to run back toward the Apollo Center building. Inez pointed the Shadowkeeper at her mother and blindly pulled the trigger. The weapon made a noise like a cannon and belched a cloud of dense black smoke. At the same moment, a black and white blur shot past Inez on her right. "Ishwar!" called out a familiar, high-pitched voice. "Din! Nakula! Where are you? Can you hear me?" Inez had no time to see who was talking, as at that moment, a laser bolt sailed over her head and she ducked to the ground. "Check your fire!" Corder roared above the din. "We've got children in the line of fire! Watch your aim!" The lights and sounds of gunfire were like that of a thunderstorm. Inez holstered the Shadowkeeper and drew her laser rifle. In the tall grass, saturated with early morning dew, she saw steam rising from the barrel of her weapon. Inez spotted a flicker of green light a short distance away, the muzzle flash of a plasma weapon. She squeezed the trigger of her own rifle and returned fire. Mud and dirt sprayed up into Inez's face. Someone had just tried to shoot her and missed by a narrow margin. Inez rolled over to one side and looked up just in time to see the Vatera Warform and Setla thundering into the fight, while Irabik and the trio of Cybon flew above. The Vatera took aim with its railgun and fired a slug. The concussive blast of the weapon deafened Inez for just a moment, and when her hearing returned, she could hear the voice of Akira Robinson yelling, "Retreat! Fall back now!" After a few moments, the noise of gunfire died away, and there was only the sound of people panting and asking if everyone around them was all right. Inez stood up and took stock of the scene around her. Akira Robinson and her supporters had fled the scene, but not all of them got away. Out of the original 10, 4 security personnel were dead on the ground. One man was blown away by the Batera, while Quarter and Monkeystrap killed another. Victoria, Emmanuel, and Jay brought down a third man, while the fourth was dropped during the opening salvo, and it was unclear who was responsible. Polly Spark was also dead. She was shot and killed during the first moments of the fight. Among the rescuers, there was only one injury. Carfu had been shot in the shoulder by a Gauss rifle. But in true Muton fashion, she was shrugging it off. Carfu's sheer size and density meant it would take much more than a single Gauss slug to bring her down. David Sepulveda and 4 of his fellow prisoners came over to Inez's side. Both of them felt a pang of guilt when they realized Adam Barter was killed by crossfire at some point during the fighting. "I never saw who did it," Inez confessed. "I'm sorry, David." "I'm the one who should be sorry," David said. "I should have figured out who your mother was long ago. She said a lot of things you agree with," Inez said. "I know. I thought we were all on the same side for a while, too." With some help from Carfu and the Batera, the prisoners were freed from their shackles and picked up weapons from the fallen. Then Victoria asked, "Where'd all the kids go?" A high-pitched voice replied, "We're in here!" Everyone turned toward the Apollo Center. Standing in front of the glass doors, Cassandra Espinosa waved both hands over her head to get the rescuers' attention. "We're all in here!" Cassandra repeated. "Everyone's okay!" Inez felt her heart sink into her stomach. Now that she thought about it, she realized that it had been Cassandra who ran past her during the firefight. As the group ran toward the structure, Inez started to raise her voice to scold Cassandra for disobeying her, but Lawrence stopped her. "Survive now, parent later," he said. "We've got a bigger problem now. Look over there." As she reached the building entrance, Inez looked around. Far away, on the horizon, a second flare was visible, burning red in the night. Someone had answered the first flare from a few moments ago. Maui quickly donned his smart glasses and looked around, taking in as much data as he could. "Your mother put out a call for reinforcements," Maui said, "and Rafi Bakir has replied. He's going to bring a force of UN Space Rangers down on us in a few minutes." Inez did a quick head count, realizing that the rescue party had expanded to 28 members, 29 if she counted Cassandra. "How many Space Rangers?" Inez asked. Maui's voice cracked as he replied, "About 500.